Hey Bears, Eric here, and some folks are big mad that Amandla from The Acolyte has finally taken to social media and spoken up about the cancellation of the show and her thoughts on it. And then we're going to talk about some of the responses to this from people like Star Wars Theory, and just my general thoughts on it as we go through this video. So sit back and let's check this video out together. Massive supporter of Amandla, and I really hope that they do manage to come out with something big in Star Wars that will include her again. And if not, I hope that she has major success in the industry. Let's check out the video.
Hello. I thought I would get on here and just speak candidly. I hate doing this. I hate doing this, but I'm gonna do it. I don't use social media very much anymore.
Good.
And I'm so happy about that. But there are many folks out there that I want.
You know, it really sucks that people in the industry years ago could use social media as a way to promote their products, be happy about things they're involved in, all kinds of cool stuff. But now it's like the minute you get involved with like some sort of popular IP or franchise, you have to assume that you're going to get dogpiled on social media. And that really sucks.
I want to acknowledge and I want to show appreciation and love and support for. So that's why I'm hopping on here to talk about this, which is that our Star Wars show has been canceled. And I'm gonna be transparent and say that it's not a huge shock for me. Of course, I live in the bubble of my own reality, but for those who aren't aware, there has been a rampage of vitriol that we have faced since the show was even announced, when it was still just a concept and when no one had even seen it.
Okay, I want to reiterate. She's talking specifically about the astroturfing that goes on here on YouTube and on social media. I went back and I looked, and people like Ryan Cannell, Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, many of the other ones were talking about this show more than a year ago. Some of them go back as far as 3 years, back when it was announced in December. 3 years ago, already attacking it, already talking shit about it. And this is the kind of behavior that was going on. And this is the kind of stuff that I've talked about quite openly on streams, that I have less of a problem with people who are watching media or have watched media and they're criticizing something that they're watching. It's sometimes it's useful and it's valid criticism. Sometimes it's not, but at the very least they're engaging with the content that they're talking about. In this situation, she's talking specifically about what really bugs me about the pipeline of negativity here on YouTube, is talking about stuff and hating stuff well before we even see one frame of the show, before we see any concept art, before we even know anything about the show other than like the base story behind what the show is going to be. Sometimes it's just the title of the show. You can go back and look. 3 years ago, they were already calling the show a woke mess, a woke disaster. They were doing this that far back. And so it's right here on YouTube. Literally, you can go to their channels and find it. It's not hidden or anything like that. And so that's specifically what she's talking about. And it was happening.
And that's when we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language towards us.
And I also want to reiterate, that is also there for you to see. If you go look at the Instagram post, anything that's still up that was out, you know, during the time the show was airing or before the show was airing, any sort of promotion for that, if you go back and you look, you will see like slurs being used, coded language, microaggressive stuff in the comments, straight up racism in the comments. A lot of times from accounts that have no face, no names, they're just numbers, or obviously troll accounts, bot accounts that were going on. These things were happening. And so for me, it's like, even if you were not participating in that behavior and you're someone that didn't like the show, at the very least, you could just denounce that behavior and go, yeah, it was happening, shouldn't have been happening, and they still had to put up with it. But that's not what's going on. Typically, the people see that and they immediately start deflecting. Oh, that wasn't why people were complaining about the show. That's not what she's talking about, and that's not what I've been talking about or anybody else. When a person of color, when a woman, when a queer person, any marginalized community gets attacked for any reason, even if it's only one comment is too much. They shouldn't have to put up with that shit. And it's just the internet stuff. That excuse doesn't work anymore. We're talking about massive amounts of hate going towards these people. So even if you're one of the people that did not like the show and legitimately have a problem with it, like a lot of us had problems with the show, the kind of stuff that she is talking about is not that. They are two different things. And the fact that you think they're the same is part of the problem.
And, this really affected me when I first got the job, because it's just not something, even though I anticipated it happening, it's not something you can fully understand what it feels like until it's happening to you. However, I feel like I've kind of moved through those feelings in various ways, including being vocal about it myself. For me, it just became a situation where there was no option but for me to honor my sense of ethics and my belief system and my value system while being in this very unique position.
Okay.
It was kind of like I had this very unique experience of experiencing the world at large, which is, of course, hyper divisive right now, through the lens of this very, very unique opportunity of being in Star Wars.
And that's because the spectrum right now when it comes to fandoms and politics is becoming blurred. If you'll see now, there's a couple of outlets. There's a show out now called, I think it's Pop Culture Crisis, which is a fandom show geared towards stuff like this, but is overseen by Tim Pool, a political commentator. So you have that, you will find that a lot. You go around and you see these highly well-produced, slick shows on YouTube, whether it be that show or other shows like that. You look at the top end and you will find out they're being funded by some sort of political ideology. And this is the kind of stuff that just kind of seeps through the cracks, and the people that are watching it may not be aware of it. How many people watching that show would know that Tim Pool had anything to do with that without digging? Probably not, because they don't ever really make it obvious. I've tuned into a few of their shows. I've seen some of their clips. It doesn't seem like it's very obvious that it's being produced by that company. And so when you see that, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. So that's why getting involved with this stuff, and to be honest, I mean, mental health wise and just in general, she's probably going to be much happier not having to deal with all this shit that the fandom is throwing at her. That sucks, because you know, how are you going to get people that even want to be a part? Who's going to want to act in any of these shows? Anyone in general, knowing there's a possibility that they could just be completely and utterly trashed on the internet by random people, random weirdos.
And it brought up a lot for me, a lot socio-political dynamics, a lot about my own value system, how I respond to that kind of hatred, how I move through the world at large. And it just became inarguable for me at a certain point that in order to continue to be myself, I would have to honor my value system by being vocal, even within the context of working for Disney and working within the large, within the large, massive IP that is Star Wars.
And that problem persists when it comes to Disney. They've made statements about this, but there are no safeguards in place to protect anyone in this industry when they're getting this kind of hate and this kind of negativity thrown towards them. And I've seen people go, oh, well, if these people are such strong people, why do they need the assistance of these corporations? Are you stupid? Are you fucking stupid? Is that a real question? These corporations are the one that hired them to work the job. When you were hired to work at a business, the business should be protecting you as an employee of that business. You shouldn't be going to work worried about being hurt or harmed, whether it be physical or mental or verbal or whatever it is, and the company just sits around and lets it happen. If I go to work, if I worked somewhere like Pizza Hut, I shouldn't have to listen to people attacking me about the business practices of Pizza Hut as a company before hiring me as an employee for whatever reason and not get the support of the company. Who would go to work and deal with that? Nobody should have to deal with that. I don't expect people to go out and put their life on the line for Walmart. We're talking about a mega corporation. They have money to help with these kinds of things. They could do campaigns to help with these kinds of things, but they didn't. And not only did they not do anything, but then they canceled the show, allowing all of these people to be ran over multiple times with the bus that they've been thrown under.
On that topic, I just have to say it has been an incredible honor and dream for me to be in this universe. And
you always will be.
It still feels, even though, of course, I'm very sad about the show being canceled, and I'm sad about us not being able to give people who are invested into it more, because I'll just feel a lot of levity and joy around the fact that I got to experience it. This is an edit.
I don't know who edited this. This is the
people
longest
loved
version
it,
I can find.
And that people were so responsive. I poured through a lot of different iterations of fan art and ship art and fan theories and things that were just so beautiful and
because there were a lot of people
filled my heart with joy.
I was one of the people that liked the show, but something doesn't have to be perfect for you to like it or even love it. Imperfection has its beauty. And so when you're watching a TV show or a movie and you may not like every single episode of a season, that doesn't mean that you hate the show automatically. But the people that are doing this, the people that are engaging this, would have you believe that something as simple as a fire in space somehow ruins the entire series, or seeing a character whose story hasn't been completely laid out in front of you in that one episode ruins an entire legacy of movies and things of that nature without ever watching the rest of the show. And this is being media illiterate. Like, they have no media literacy. And so they've taken all of the worst people, the people who don't understand art, that don't understand movies and TV shows, and they've told them what they should be thinking, told them what they should be feeling, and now they've been programmed that way. And they've been programmed to the point where they'll come into my comments and say they're not programmed, call independent thinkers programmed, and not understand that they're all saying the same thing. If there's 500 of them in my comment section repeating the same thing, they've heard Nerdrotic say, or they've heard Critical Drinker say, or something like that. Once you're doing that, you are no longer thinking for yourselves. You're just repeating what someone else has said to you. And you need to break away from that, honestly. And the rest of the video is pretty much just her going on about thanking people. So we're going to pause there. If you guys want to see the full video, the one that I'm watching here, I will link it in the description box in the bottom. All right, so we have two tweets. The first one we're going to look at is from Star Wars Theory. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this person. In my opinion, one of the most irresponsible content creators in the fandom space, who was built up, or had a channel built up that didn't really dive too much in the toxicity, like really just a theory channel with a lot of really, I guess, fun content to dive into for fans of Star Wars, and did a heel turn and now has gone into the Grifto Chud space and taken the momentum of that channel and subverted it to the negative side, because money is more important than ethics and morals and all the things that they accuse Hollywood of doing as a entire system they do individually themselves. So he says here that Amanda's response to the Acolyte being canceled, do you agree with her? Yes, 100%. She says, paraphrasing, the show suffered from tons of vitriol, bigotry, racism, and hate from the alt-right, which essentially is why it got canceled. So this is another thing I want to speak on. A lot of people would say the show was objectively bad, that the show was going to fail because it was always going to be a bad show. And say for a minute that they were right. Say they were 100% right about that. There was nothing redeeming about the show. Everything about it was bad. It was a woke disaster, blah, blah, blah. Just give them 100% accuracy on that. And that is why it got canceled. Then what was the purpose of all of the astroturfing? What was the purpose of all of the hate, the negativity, all of the stuff surrounding the show? What was the incentive for anyone to go so hard, making 3, 4, 5 videos a day sometimes for months about the show? What was the incentive to do all of that if the show was objectively a disaster and it was destined to fail? What was the purpose of that? If that were in fact true, then that would mean they didn't have to say anything and the show was just going to fail anyway. And this is where I have an issue with it. If that were the case, they would not have to do what they're doing. But then on the flip side of that, They want you to believe that they're fighting back in the culture war against some sort of negative ideology. And so if that were the case, then they would be engaging in the negativity that went towards the show, which then in fact would participate and help the show get canceled, which would be essentially cancel culture, which is something they also fight back against, because this is a community that fights really hard for free speech and free expression, which is also kind of a strange place for them to be in. It's a weird wedge for them to be in. So then they would bear some responsibility for what's going on, if that was in fact what they were doing. However, if they did not believe that they were any of these things, alt-right, bigoted, racist, vitreous, if they did not believe they were any of these things, then these would not be reasons to be offended. If that is separate from what the behavior they were doing, and they were simply culture warriors fighting back for the good of Hollywood or whatever they want to call it, if they believe that, then those two things would be separate, and they should be standing on the side of the people who are denouncing it and saying this is not good. She shouldn't have had to deal with this. The actor shouldn't have had to deal with this. They should be on that side of it, not the side of defending the actual bigotry, racism, etc., which we saw. Those are things that actually happened. Again, you can fact check that by simply going to their social medias, the ones that still have it, and you can see it on there. It's been documented. So they were in fact dealing with that. So if you simply wanted to say, I acknowledge that was happening, but that wasn't what I was doing, and it wasn't what my community was doing, you could still denounce that. You could say, we're fighting the culture war and we denounce all of this shit as well. We're just talking about the quality of the show. The problem is, in their minds, they can't separate the criticism of the vitreous, bigoted, racist, sexist, misogynistic, alt-right behavior, because they understand that they're part of that. They get it. They know that's their community. And they have no defense against that. So they just ignore it or pretend that it doesn't happen. Because if they acknowledge it, then they would acknowledge that they took part in that. So it's this weird situation where they want to take ownership of helping take down a quote-unquote woke disaster on a show that they already said was objectively bad, which would have failed anyway, according to them, because it was DOA, right? So according to them, it would have failed anyway. But then they also don't want to be included in the group that's considered bigoted and racist. But if that is the group that is in fact claiming ownership of taking the show down, then that puts them in a weird spot. And he goes on here to say, I don't know about all that. I just thought it was a poorly written show, was boring, and fucked with the lore. So if that's the case, then why aren't you denouncing the stuff above that? And I looked to see if there was a response video. I don't see one yet. Maybe we'll revisit that on a live stream. But if you aren't doing those things, you say, oh, I don't know about all that. I just thought it was a poorly written show. Okay, cool. So denounce that stuff. Denounce it. Say that you don't want to see the people involved in creating the show dealing with bigotry, racism, etc. Just say it. Just denounce it. That's all you have to do. If you would denounce that, then that would separate you from that, and then you can just move on and you don't have to worry about it. But there's no money in that. And you do realize the people you're associating with do participate in that. So if you denounce that, you possibly screw up the bag that you're getting by aligning yourself with those people. So you're willing to turn a blind eye to that because there's money at the end of the rainbow. The light at the end of the tunnel is you have to step through all the racism and bigotry to get to it and just pretend it doesn't exist. That's why you do that. Again, haven't seen a response video. One more tweet we're going to look at, and then I'm going to let you go. All right, so this is from a small account, but it's getting a lot of traction. I don't want to give them too much, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. But this is sort of the behavior, the exact behavior that Amandla was talking about in her video, exemplified in a response to her video. Things we learned last night. That she is an R slur. Okay? Just an insult. Got it. A fake victim. While you are participating in the abuse that she was complaining about prior to making this video. You are just going further and pushing further with the stuff that she was dealing with by making this post. So clearly not a fake. By the way, it's also documented. All of it's documented. You just go look under the announcement of the cancellation. Go look at it. And then calls her a drug addict. So this is again just reinforcing the behavior that the people on the show have to deal with, specifically the lead characters on the show. And yeah, I say this a lot. I haven't said it a lot lately, but I want to reiterate this. Only a hit dog hollers. And if somebody's not talking about you and you start running in defense of that and playing a victim to something that you're not being accused of, then you are putting yourself in that position and saying, hey, that's me over here. All those things you said about those people, you're talking about me. Because as someone who was watching the show, as a fan of the show, I don't feel like any of her statements about the behavior, the negative behavior that was being pushed towards her, the words, the language, all of that stuff, I don't think she was talking about me because I never did any of that stuff. So if you didn't do any of that stuff, she wasn't talking about you.